You're now listening to the Sacred Soul Podcast. Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I am really excited that you're here today. We are going to be talking about intimacy. My personal relationship with intimacy has really evolved over the past couple of years, where I used to believe that intimacy was heavily reliant on a partner or a relationship, and I had the belief that we needed to sort of exploit our body parts and open ourselves up sexually in order to have intimate experiences. And also believing that it was a sexual duty or obligation in love and romance to have those experiences. And over the past year and a half, I've really heavily prioritized healing my wounds around intimacy because it has shown up a lot for me in my marriage, where it's been really hard for me to connect to my partner because I found later through my healing that I was really just disconnected from myself, from my own body, from having intimate experiences with myself on a soul level. And so I really had to sit with myself mindfully, consciously, thoughtfully, and recognizing through this experience more than anything is that intimacy is having compassion for yourself and not seeing your flaws as these imperfect, ugly parts of you, but rather seeing the fragility in those parts of your body and what they have to say to you. And so we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that today. Through my healing experiences, I have really come to realize that we have to create safeness within ourselves. We have to be a safe landing ground for ourselves to be fully received in all of our experiences, especially the hard moments where we are then deeply challenged in sort of that relationship that we have to ourselves. Because when we go through hard shit that challenges our identity, our self-worth, our value, that can kind of deplete our connection to intimacy, because then we start to detach from within and we start to reject parts of ourselves. And we've talked about that in the last podcast episode, and I think it's perfect going into this one because the last one was heavily on the divine feminine, and I think that has everything to do with intimacy within ourselves. And what I found is that when we can love ourselves full spectrum, accept ourselves full spectrum, see our light and our shadow, and recognize that both of those pillars exist and they matter and they're valuable, I think that we really can offer ourselves the most divine, intimate experiences. We can receive intimacy in its fullness and in its purity. I feel like intimacy is responsive, it's reciprocal, it's communicative. So when we give ourselves that space to be in communion with the mind, the body, and the spirit, and we're sitting with ourselves and we're fully receiving ourselves, we are actively literally in holy communion with God, with Source, with the Creator. That's what communion is. It is that sort of spiritual, thoughtful, mindful acceptance of what we are looking at. And so if we can look at ourselves in this way, we build more spiritual experiences that can stem from within, and then we can pour that out into our partnership. So just knowing that intimacy starts from within, and we don't have to seek that in other people to kind of let that be fulfilled for ourselves. We can give that to ourselves through building that relationship within. My earliest memory of my intimacy wound showing up for me was very, very young in my childhood. After I had my first assault as a child, I remember shortly after that, it became really challenging for me to be intimate with people that I loved. Even my own mother, my brothers, my grandpa who raised me. It became really hard for me to be vulnerable and have that sort of spiritual, loving, pure, intimate relationship with my own family members. It was very hard for me to feel comfortable to even hug my mom or lay on her chest, because I would become highly aware that my face was near her boobs when I'm laying on her chest. And I was very young when I was already becoming aware of body parts being sexualized because I was sexualized. So I would move away or not want to be close to her chest. It was hard for me to, at a young age, sit on my grandpa's lap, just very innocently wanting to be close to my grandpa because he's literally like my dad. It was hard for me to do things like that because I would become aware that potentially he could feel something for me if I rubbed up against him in a inappropriate way or in a wrong way. I never wanted to put myself in that position, even though I know that I've always been safe with my family, my grandpa and my mom, and that would never happen. It was my mind started to become tainted by that experience that I had when I was 6 years old of being sexually assaulted. It literally changed the way that I perceived intimacy, even in the purest form. Because remember that intimacy is not just sexual. It is pure. It is a connection that we have to the people that we love and that we feel safe with. Intimacy is the safe landing ground for people to be vulnerable and open and have that connection. And that was sort of taken from me from that experience of sexual assault. And later in my life, when I got a little bit older, when I was around getting to the middle school age, I started to recognize that I became very flirtatious and I wanted and I was craving sex. And that sounds terrible because I know that I was probably, how old are you in middle school? I don't even know. Very, very young. What is that, like 10, 11, 12, 13? I remember at a very young age wanting sex, wanting and craving to be touched. And it's because the way that my brain perceived love and the way that I perceived that I was valuable was through my body and through the exploitation of opening myself up to somebody. That made me feel loved. That made me feel valued. That made me feel worthy. And so I started to look for that just through my fantasies in my own mind. I never actually acted on those desires, but I remember being a little girl and like thinking about these things often. And I'm sharing this with you here today very vulnerably because I know that there are so many women who especially have childhood trauma that grow up with this skewed perspective and then thinking that we are dirty and that we're wrong and we're nasty for having these fantasies when that's what we knew. That's what we learned through experiencing it. And I want to validate for other women that are watching this that you are not dirty, that you are not wrong, you are not bad for having moments where maybe you, in sexual assault, your body even enjoyed it, or you didn't stop it, or whatever came through, because we do what's safest for us in the moment, especially if you're very young when these things happen. There is no way to sort of escape these situations than to sometimes just submit to it, especially looking back when we're children and these things happen. And we have to not hold shame and guilt against ourselves for just trying to survive, trying to protect ourselves, and then growing up and having a skewed perspective. It's all about having grace, having love, and having no judgment over those parts of ourselves that we're very, very confused and that we're learning things that were not in alignment with love. And I remember an experience actually when I was in middle school, and I remember going to my room and wanting to explore myself very young. It's so weird for me to even have this realization because I realized like, damn, I was like super young. But I remember having this fantasy, this one fantasy in particular, and I'm only telling you guys this because I think it's super fucking important for whoever else can resonate that you are not alone in these experiences. And I've only told one other person, my best friend, Bryn. She has been the only person that I've told this to. I haven't even told my husband. He's gonna know now watching this podcast. But I used to have this fantasy of like being raped. I wanted somebody to come and rape me because that was the only way that I felt valued. It literally turned me on thinking about somebody coming in and hurting me, harming me, disrespecting me, and then leaving and walking away. And I think it's just so almost empowering for me to say that in this space, because now I realize where that comes from. It comes from a very fragile, very broken part of myself, of my childhood, and a very shameful part of my life where none of that was even my fault. And I think now by expressing this and by being vulnerable, it really allows that sort of chain to that experience to be broken, because now I can see the truth and I can look at it and I can say it without shame, because I'm not the only one that has had these thoughts. I'm not the only one that will have these thoughts, because there are so many women that go through this, and men too, that I know have had sexual assault experiences. And I think it's important to remember that you are not alone, and that those thoughts are, I don't know if is it normal to have those thoughts? I think so. I mean, we have those thoughts, and then we go to therapy, or we go to counseling, or we have healings, and we find that intimacy within. Regardless, moving forward, I started to find myself being very promiscuous in middle school. When I started to have those fantasies, I started to want to like always show my belly. I wanted big boobs so bad. I still don't have big boobs, but I think it's just funny because I wanted so badly to just like, it was sort of a way for me to take my power back, being promiscuous and showing my body and my long legs and like flirting a lot. The thing about me is I literally cannot be intimate with somebody sexually if I am not in love with them. So I would have never acted on those things anyways, and I never did. But I was always very promiscuous growing up and wanting to like have that control back. And I think for some of you girls and women who are watching this now that remember after moments of being sexually assaulted or raped, and then moving forward in life, if you remember yourself being also kind of promiscuous after, that is sort of our way of taking our power back and having that control again. The control over, I get to choose when I want to be sexy, I get to choose when I want to show up and be empowered and be hot, and who gets to see that and who gets to engage with that. It's sort of this like wounded feminine, aggressive sort of way of showing up and reclaiming what was taken, which is the power, right? Our sexual power. And so women who show up very promiscuous, they are reclaiming that sexual power. And I think that if we can recognize that about ourselves, we realize that we actually don't have to show up that way. We just have to reconnect within. We just have to love ourselves deeper. We just have to forgive ourselves for thinking that we have to sort of do these over extroverted things to make up for the void. And it's interesting because when I started to sort of have more shame around now, I was like, people started to call me a flirt and call me a tease. And I started to feel that shame because now I was being slut shamed. Now I'm in high school and everybody thought I was a slut, which is funny because I had sex with one person that my entire high school career. It's just interesting to me because then in high school, I started to have a lot of shame and I didn't want to talk to people. I didn't want to show my body. I didn't want to be touched. I didn't want to be looked at. It was really hard in my relationship with Johnny because I rejected so much of myself that I had no intimacy with myself at all. There was no sort of spiritual connection with my mind, body, spirit, totally out of alignment. Because I was reaching to be somebody that Johnny could love, that his parents could love, that the world could love, that all my peers who thought I was a whore could love. There was so much of myself that was constantly being rejected. I wasn't able to give Johnny like true intimacy because I didn't have it with myself. I wouldn't even let him like look at my face because I hated my face. I had a lot of acne and I had to wear a lot of makeup and I always felt ugly. Regardless, I think that this just proves that there's so many ways that the intimacy wound can show up for us in life where we almost try to make up for the void, that loss, that part of us that feels so disconnected and disrespected and lost, that we can either show up too promiscuous, we can be too much or too little. I want to be touched or I don't want to be touched at all. I want to be looked at and adored or nobody fucking look at me, I hate the world. And I think that maybe it fluctuates, the healing. Where it really hit me was when I became a mom. And I started to breastfeed and I would become enraged with breastfeeding. Just having my nipples being touched and suckled on by my pure, beautiful baby girl. Feeding her, nurturing her, which is the most sacred and normal thing that we could ever do. It's the most beautiful thing that we could ever experience as mothers. I couldn't enjoy it. I could not be present with it because I was constantly needing to disassociate so that I would have my hands in fists of how much anger was brought up for me from being touched in this way. And this is where I was like, okay, I need to heal. I need to really think about why this is coming up for me. And of course, it stemmed from a lot of experiences of being sexually assaulted, not only in my childhood, but also happened to me in college I think two times, where I was literally chased down the hallway naked. I was in college and I was getting ready for my 8 a.m. class. And I lived in the dorms, and I was actually the resident assistant. So I was like in charge of the dorms. And I remember getting in the shower at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I was kind of just doing my thing, shampooing my hair. And all of a sudden I had this weird feeling. And I'm very intuitive, obviously. You guys know that I'm a medium and I'm very intuitive. I started to have this very weird feeling, like something bad was about to happen. And I remember kind of having this sense of peace just like washed over me. I felt very calm, even though I knew that something bad was going to happen. And this is how intuition comes in, you guys. It will not activate any sort of crazy feeling. I had the intuitive download and I felt super calm. Like I just needed to like prepare myself. I remember opening the shower curtain and there was a very tall man literally right in front of my face, right outside the shower curtain. And he had his pants down and he was masturbating. And I didn't know that he was watching me in the shower the whole time. He was watching me through the crack of the shower curtain. And immediately when I saw this man, I screamed at the top of my lungs because it scared me so bad. He ran out of the bathroom and I was standing there hyperventilating, just naked. I grabbed my towel, I ran out of the bathroom, and I saw him at the end of the hallway because the bathroom was at one end, the door to leave is at the other. My bedroom is right in the center of the hallway. And I'm thinking to myself, fuck, I need to run to my bedroom. So I would literally have to run towards him to run to my bedroom. And we're standing at both ends of the hallway and we're staring at each other, and I'm just in a towel. And he starts to walk towards me faster, and he's starting to pull down his pants again, taking out his private part. And I kept yelling to him, go back, go back. I was asking him to like leave, and I started to I had no other choice. I had to run towards my bedroom. And so when I started to run towards my room, he started to run towards me. So we're running towards each other. And thankfully I ran faster than him, and I got into my bedroom. I slammed the door, and I literally almost slammed his fingers in the door. And I locked it, and I went into the corner of my bedroom when I was in fetal position, just bawling my eyes out because I realized that this man almost just raped me. And I could just hear him breathing very heavily outside of my door for like 2 minutes before he walked away. So there have been a lot of experiences like that really took me so much further away from myself, because my body now didn't feel safe. I didn't feel safe to wear certain clothing. I didn't feel safe to be touched. I just didn't feel safe in this body at all, ever. And I had to go through a lot of counseling. That's why I have my dog Chloe, who's not in here today, but she's outside the door. That's why I have my dog Chloe, because I was passing out randomly and having full-blown panic attacks after that experience because I thought that something bad was always going to happen to me. 3 years after that experience, I could not take a shower without being super afraid. I had to have Johnny standing outside of the shower every single time because I was so scared that when I opened it, somebody was going to be there. When I was in college, after this happened, I had to have my friends be with me when I was in the shower. I could not do anything by myself. I was very scared. There's all of these moments where I'm like, damn, I need to really do some healing work. And the way that I did that was through tantric healing. And this literally changed my life. And this is something more recent for me. I started to do this thing called tantric eating and tantric eye gazing. And it's really so life-changing because you get to have this mindfulness and this sort of conscious awareness of the physical body and like how safe your body really is and how much your body loves you, and the mind body spirit connection is just so fucking profound. And something that I learned about tantric eating is that like we don't just eat for survival. I think that consciously as humans or subconsciously as humans we do things without realizing that we're doing it for a deeper purpose. Like some people who are sex addicts, they're not having sex just because it feels good. Like they're doing it because they want to connect deeper, because they're seeking some level of vulnerability that they can't access on their own outside of fucking. People who eat their feelings or who have like a hard time with like drinking alcohol or doing drugs or like doing anything that's unhealthy that we're putting inside of the body, we're just trying to ground ourselves and we're trying to connect to ourselves deeper. It is a spiritual experience that we're looking for. We don't just eat for survival, we eat for grounding, we eat for mindfulness and connection. And so tantric eating is the practice of doing any task super slow. So you get anything that you want to eat, any meal that you're eating, and you become aware, like, okay, I tried it for the first time with a bagel. You look at the bagel or whatever it is that you're eating and you put it in your mouth really, really slow. And before I go into this deeper, Tantric eating is really important because it's the most intimate thing that we could ever do. Intimacy starts at birth because our mouth is the most intimate place, because this is where we explore. Intimacy equals vulnerability, it equals safety, it equals spirituality, it equals sexual power and femininity and all of these beautiful things. That starts in our mouth. When we are babies, we explore everything by putting it in our mouth. We explore safety and nurturing and compassion and love through breastfeeding. There are so many ways that the mouth and the openness of the mouth and the vulnerability of the mouth, how that connects to intimacy. And remember that we're not looking at this in a sexual matter. We're not looking at this in sort of like, oh, like I'm horny. It's not like that. It's literally a spiritual experience. And of course that can lead into more sexual encounters, and that can be amplified through mindfulness, truly being intimate within yourself. And then we can project that into our partnerships. But remembering that it doesn't start there. Intimacy is so much fucking deeper. The spiritual connection. If our mind with intimacy is going straight to like fucking and like feeling turned on, you're really in your ego. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because you're really in your human, right? The ego is connected only to the human experience and not to the spiritual experience. You're very much in that sort of surface level, I'm in my body, but intimacy calls you to go deeper. It calls you to go to the heart space, to the solar plexus, to the sacral, to where your energy exudes and where it flows and where it can feel expansive. And I remember the first time I did tantric eating, I was eating my bagel like super slow, like you chew it super slow, swirl it around in your mouth to feel the texture, the temperature on your tongue, all of the tastes that come with whatever you're eating, and you chew it super slow, then you swallow it super slow, then you become mindful of like, okay, I feel it where it's hitting my mouth, I feel it going down my throat, I feel it digesting and going into my belly, whatever is happening. It is the most grounding experience you will ever have. The first time I did it, I was like super impatient because I don't like to eat slow, I like to eat very fast. And that can also show you where tantric eating can be valuable. Is like if you're a fast eater, you don't like chew your freaking food, you don't enjoy it, you're kind of lacking a little bit of intimacy in your life, right? So maybe tantric eating would be right for you. And then I don't know why, like I need to say that I feel like it can help with addiction. Like people who are addicted to certain types of foods, especially if you're like diabetic or you can't eat certain things, but you still feel that craving for it. Sometimes I think that if we do things more mindfully, we can feel the direction of the body and what we need. So tantric eating can be great for directing us to health and wealth inside of the body. Remember, health starts within, abundance and wealth starts within, intimacy starts within. And then that helped me to become connected to my physical body. That helped me to feel safe in my body after many, many, many years of the world making me feel unsafe and unloved, and then allowing myself to infiltrate that and internalize that, and then me hating myself, not loving myself, not feeling safe within myself. You should always feel safe in your body. That is a huge problem if you don't, and you need to take your fucking power back. And we do that in any way that we can possible, because that's number one priority. Nobody should have that power to take the safeness out of yourself. Nobody has that power, no matter what they do to you. Nobody can take that from you. So you protect that with your entire fucking life and your entire essence. And tantric eating and tantric eye gazing can help that. I remember having an experience with tantric eye gazing. This was like super profound for me. It's where you get a mirror or sit in front of a mirror and you just stare at your pupils, the dark little circles in your eyes. You just stare at that. Don't look at your nose, don't look at your forehead, don't look at your fucking eyelashes. You have to stare directly into the pupils for like 30 minutes. Oh my God. I literally saw my future self. I saw that I'm gonna die when I'm like 82, 83. I saw myself aging. I saw my past life. I saw my spirit guides in my own fucking face. One of my eyes is more vulnerable than the other. And it makes sense because one of my eyes is worse than the other. With my actual eyesight, everything manifests from the inside out, you guys. I could see and feel what my higher self had to say to me, what my body wanted to say to me. Like, it's just like so fucking emotional. And I felt like for mediumship, sometimes I have to meditate for like 40 minutes to feel that expansiveness. Like, okay, I'm ready to connect to spirit. I did eye gazing for 30 minutes, just staring at myself. After I was done and I looked at, like, I took the mirror away, I felt like I could feel spirit around me. I was so inside of myself, in my spirit, that I didn't even have to try to connect to the subtle energy of the spirit side around me. I could just feel it there. I felt so heavy in my body in the best way possible. I was rooted, I was grounded, I was so fucking sturdy and connected with my power, with my strength. And no matter what I looked like or what was happening around, I realized through Tantra that I am always, always, always connected to the roots. Always. And nothing could ever shake that, no matter what, unless I open the door and allow it in. And after all of these sort of mindful experiences where I'm just constantly connecting to myself, doing the tantric eye gazing and the tantric eating and journaling and being mindful, I started to realize that my body was changing. My periods were changing. My perspective was changing. Everything started to feel lighter. I started to become less affected by the outside world and by people's opinions. And when I would think about the past and those experiences of sexual assault that I've encountered, I am not even angry about it. I'm not. And it's hard for me as a survivor of sexual assault to talk about my experiences in an evolved way or in a healed way, because I can almost think about my unhealed self and hearing what I'm saying, and I can think about that perspective and be like, bitch, shut up. Because I think that it's hard for survivors to hear the healed side of it because there's so much fucking anger. There's so much of like, nobody understands what I went through. Nobody understands what I'm feeling. There's like a vengefulness that comes with it too. And so I just want to apologize to anybody that is listening to this and you're not there yet. It's okay that we're all in different paths of our healing journey. But I just want everybody to know, especially survivors, that you will see the other side of it, because you will reclaim your divinity. You will reclaim your power, your strength, your intimacy. That relationship with yourself is the most important one ever. We have to stop holding on to guilt and shame and these wounds. We've already experienced that. We've already been through that. We don't have to carry this fucking heavy shit with us all throughout our life. We don't have to do that. Unpack it right now and let it go. Letting it go, I know how triggering that sounds. I don't mean it in that way, you guys know me, but like letting it go, right? Because sometimes we fucking hold on to the pain. You just have to let it go and return to us, return to yourself. Okay, you guys, so I just pulled some cards looking at the collective's relationship with intimacy. So what your relationship, the energy feels like with intimacy. And I think it's very interesting, the cards that came out. It feels a little bit heavy to me for sure. And so we got the Hierophant with the Ten of Cups. Sorry, don't look at my nails. I need to paint my nails. But the Ten of Cups and the Hierophant, which is interesting because both of these cards are very indicative of family dynamics, religious dynamics, sort of the expectations that our family members have over the way that we perceive love and intimacy, and the influence that church, religion, family, expectations, parents, there's so much programming here with the way that we view intimacy. And I almost feel like there is this sort of disconnect and restriction in the way that the collective expresses intimacy. There seems to be this like guilt, shame with the Hierophant. It's like the Hierophant is like sort of spiritual, church, traditional expectations, pressure. There is this sort of feeling of like needing to express ourselves intimately, maybe only in private, maybe only, I don't know, it feels like very shameful. That's like the main word that like comes to my intuition when I look at these two cards. I'm like, boom. There's a lot of shame around your connection with intimacy. And I think it's because we haven't yet felt with this 10 of cups, we haven't yet felt that evolution emotionally with cultivating intimacy in a different way, not just with our partners, right? With this King of Pentacles, it's the way that we feel valued because somebody else can feel that value from us. It's sort of the self-sacrificing 10 of Wands. I'm showing up and I'm giving myself to you and I'm exploiting myself and I'm doing all these things, and that makes me feel worthy and valued. I think that we haven't yet found this 10 of Cups evolutionary way of expressing intimacy, and that is through vulnerability with the Sun card. It's through freeing ourselves from needing to have our intimacy be latched onto somebody else with this King of Pentacles. This could be a partner, this could be our parents' expectations, this could be societal expectations. It just feels like we haven't yet touched it and felt it. So this, with the Sun card, this is a rebirth, right? This is the new opportunity being laid down for you to like step into this newfound sense of freedom. Intimacy is freedom. It is feeling and being the embodiment of love and connection and softness and tenderness and fragility. It's like shining light on all of these sort of old, outdated beliefs and programming that tells us that certain things are shameful. To me, this is like very unhealed. And I'm not saying that like in a derogatory way. I'm just saying like there are things that we get to heal now. Like this is an opportunity. It's not like, oh, you're unhealed. It's like, hey, you're unhealed. And now with the Sun card, we can like recognize that and then take the mindful time to shed all of this weight, all of this heaviness. A lot of you guys are still carrying a lot of pain from the past. I think a lot of you too, like I didn't really want to say this, but I think that it's necessary to give validation. But I think a lot of you have sexual trauma from family members potentially. With this 10 of Cups is the family card, as well as the Hierophant. It's sort of this like, we need to keep this a secret. This needs to be pure. We need to not ruin people's reputations. So there could be sort of this like family secret with the 10 of Wands, where I think that is also something that needs to be healed. That's also a heavy trigger where maybe like some of you, your family members, your mom, dad didn't believe you. Some of us could also have like somehow this is religiously connected with intimacy, healing, maybe the way that we're taught about intimacy and purity culture, which can be very demonizing. I'll talk about that in another episode, but purity culture can be very harmful for us, especially for women who have sexual assault trauma, because then we are deemed as unworthy or dirty or used. And so there is this sense of like really needing to free ourselves from old belief systems that do not align with where we are evolving to next, spiritually with the Wands and emotionally, energetically with our perception and our emotional intelligence, where that's headed to. The advice is to free yourself with the Sun card. It is to recognize that we are the embodiment of love. We are the embodiment of power. And what we need to start doing to be more connected to our intimacy is just be mindful with your body. Literally, how can I sit with myself and just be mindful with myself, be fragile with my flaws, be tender with myself. When we are in communion with the body, we are in holy communion with the source, with God, with the Great Spirit. When you sit with the Great Spirit, God, source, creator, whatever you call it, it's the same thing regardless of what we call it. When you have a spiritual experience where you feel source, that never leaves you. That is imprinted in your body. That wisdom never leaves you. Every time we sit with ourselves, we are sitting with source. Be mindful, eat slow, look at yourself in the mirror, love yourself, be tender. Intimacy starts within. I hope this helped you. I hope you learned something. Thank you for listening with compassion and with care, and I will see you next time.